Okay, we are live.
Awesome.
My name is Clarissa Griebel. I'm Director of Advancement of the Committee of 70. With me today is Marcus Hall. Marcus, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. So again, my name is Marcus Hall, Director for Workforce Operations for Philadelphia Works. Philadelphia Works is the local workforce development board for Philadelphia County. And my unit really drives the strategy to really ensure high quality and effectiveness across the adult and youth workforce development systems and other employment related initiatives for Philadelphia County. Obviously, their role as the local workforce development board. So if I can provide some context in terms of what the role for the Workforce Development Board is, just to make sure that people are clear. So we really serve as the backbone for the public workforce system in each of the respective counties. So there are hundreds of workforce development boards across the country. Philadelphia is normally between like the fourth and sixth largest, just because of the amount of investment that really comes from federal and state funds. So services we know happen locally. And so being able to maintain like the ability for local workforce boards like Philadelphia Works, to work with system providers to assess, design, and really provide in-demand services for employment-related services, I should say. It's really our mission and our focus around the public workforce system.
Thank you so much. So my first question, removing barriers for underserved communities has been a recurring theme. How do you see the election outcomes affecting efforts to ensure equitable access to workforce development programs and opportunities?
Yeah, thank you for starting here. Because honestly, there's been a lot of traction recently from I think from the federal level and also from the state level to be able to really address the administrative barriers and hurdles that we know government policy, government procedures really puts in place to kind of make it harder for job seekers to be able to get access to the public workforce system. So like if you think about like why should someone like be expected to really provide their social security number to just use a computer lab? Right? Like why and would I be expecting for someone in the year 2024 to bring a pay stub to a Career Lake Center to be able to verify employment to maintain benefits? Like these are systems that we have, large integrated systems that are being managed by different government agencies that if we were able to have them like communicate with each other can really reduce a lot of those administrative hurdles that are eventually are actually going to the job seekers themselves. So the government needs to really be able to work smarter. And hopefully, like this election really brings in like forward-thinking elected officials who can work smarter for its people and to make sure that they're are really focusing on the unnecessary hoops and leaps that are built into the system that are really not mandated by often like federal agencies. Like for instance, as part of our state requirements, like we need to be able to provide hacks for our social security numbers as part of getting access to some of the resources for the public workforce system. But that shouldn't necessarily be a part of the process at the very onset. We need to be able to have the relationship be the focus for participants to make sure that they trust that we're trying to get them acclimated and get them into the best employment and training opportunities as possible. I will also mention that we have a lot of different qualitative surveys that we administered in the system itself. Consistently, the barriers that we see or that we're hearing from our job seekers who are trying to get access to the system are really twofold: childcare and transportation, right? And we know that there is a role for public-private partnerships within the space. So supporting employers that like maintain or partner with local childcare centers to support its employees, or assessing childcare reimbursement rates and state and federally mandated staffing requirements for childcare agencies, expanding access to small business loans and grant programs to prop up entrepreneurs looking to start their own agency. And also from a transportation standpoint, like this is like one thing I would love to be able to like have our elected officials really be able to focus on is really being able to strengthen the infrastructure, right? Like, there's service expansion models that job seekers need to be able to access in order for them to get to a training program or get to an apprenticeship program that might be located on a different side of the city. When I had my pre-apprenticeship program that was located in West Philly, in North Philly, excuse me, we had a number of our participants that lived in West Philly. So we established a partnership with Lyft that provided a $500 Lyft credit to each participant in that program to ensure that they were able to get access to transportation to get to the program for training. So how are we able to really be able to scale this? Not only be able to utilize those public-private partnerships, but then support like the SEPTAs and Amtraks of the world that ultimately like really need to be able to not only have the funds to build the infrastructure, but also the training programs to make sure we have folks like in those positions to drive those buses, to drive those trains, to be able to obviously like man those transportations.
Yeah, it's not about just getting employees to work on time. It's about getting our future workforce on time and
Right. Exactly.
and efficiently. What measures do you believe elected officials can take to encourage collaboration, innovation, and investment in workforce development, especially in addressing the workforce challenges facing Philadelphia?
So, just some background context here. So, the public workforce system and even local workforce development boards were really put into were really implemented from the Workforce Investment Act, or WIA, which was then updated to the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. So currently, right now, there is actually a reauthorization that is um, flowing through Congress right now that is essentially responsible for a much of the public investment around workforce initiatives like that is across the country. So as it pertains to Philadelphia Works, like WIOA flows through the Department of Labor and Industry for the state and then flows down to each of the local workforce development boards. Much of, if you're familiar with like the PA Career Link system, so these are one-stop shops where someone can come in and be able to get access to training services, employment-related services. If someone wants to be interested in phlebotomy or CDLA or CDLB training, these trainings can be paid for through these state dollars. But right now, going through the reauthorization process, there are discussions around potentially affecting the flexibility of those funds for service delivery. So when we think about like collaboration, investment, and innovation and workforce development, how are the funds that are available to be able to support the infrastructure flexible enough so that service delivery can meet the unique needs of job seekers? Like, and really expand the definition of training to include more eligible expenditures, such as supportive services like staff time, career navigation. Do we need, like, if we know that transportation is an issue, is there more flexibility that can be applied and can be advocated for so that folks don't necessarily have to be in a training program to qualify for transportation services? Can we help them be able to get access to those transportation services to get to the interview or to get to get to the credential or get to the driver's training program so they can actually get their license. There are a number of things that has to happen in order for someone to be at a place where they can actually go forward with the process of applying and getting onboarded into certain different training programs or apprenticeship programs or employment. So we shouldn't be meeting the participant and job seeker when they're there. We need to be able to meet them at the front end and be able to support once they have completed those credentials, received that employment, and moving forward, obviously, into retention. Because like, what's the point of being able to get someone in a job if they're leaving like 3 or 6 months right after it? These needs to be like growth in highly lucrative positions. So if elected officials and we can be able to understand how the funds are being used, like the restrictions that are currently in place. I just had a conversation with a provider who is working with returning citizens from all different levels of incarceration. One person, just like they had to use their unrestricted funds because ultimately they were trying to get access to vital documents, which was not really available unless you met certain parameters within the legislation, right? So being able to open that up, allowing for more flexibility within those fundings, I think will allow for the local levels to be able to have more flexibility, to be able to use those fundings to meet people where they are and be able to provide those supportive service needs.
I'm glad you say that. It's nice to have a description of what it means to meet people where they are, right? Like, what do they need and how is that defined? What advice would you offer elected officials in navigating the workforce challenges and opportunities facing Philadelphia?
Really, honestly, we're in a good place right now. I mean, I think it's time to be bold. If I'm being honest, like the stars are really aligned for us to be able to take a bold swing to transform really the economic opportunities for the city and for the Commonwealth. So we have like local and state budget surpluses. Like, there's alignment of leadership across, like from the local level from Mayor Parker to like the state level for Governor Shapiro, and obviously like from a national level for President Biden, who was just obviously just here and like went to one of our local Wawa locations. But Philadelphia has a unique opportunity to be able to shape its economic future for the next couple generations, either positively or negatively. All right. So we have federal investments in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, like the CHIPS Act. We have a wireless mesh program that's expanding internet access in West Philly. We have Bellwether and Center City and University City districts that's building economic engines, which is all well and good, but where's the human capital, right? That's going to be servicing, like being in those jobs that are being trained and upskilled to be successful within these positions within this new economy. So if we're adding on these different components and we're pushing forward with life sciences and all these different unique industry opportunities, but not reinforcing the educational institutions, not supporting the training opportunities, not forcing someone to sacrifice their current paycheck to participate in 6 month training, which is unpaid. Like that's not sustainable, especially for someone when like Philly has thousands of returning citizens returning home from different levels of incarceration every year. How are we expecting for someone who's returning home is in need of money, resources quickly to be able to say, I'm going to take a 6 month hold and participate in a training program where I'm not going to be able to get income and then move into this program. It's not feasible, it's not practical, it's not smart. So how are we able to get elected officials to be able to understand that Philadelphians need resources now? There are opportunities now. Like these industries are being built. And we're eventually going to get to a point where there's a bifurcation of the industries and jobs that are available and the folks who are trained and available to really pursue those opportunities. And if those gaps are too wide, then you're essentially going to be at odds with your main constituencies within the county, which is not going to benefit anyone.
Uh, what role do you envision elected officials playing in fostering partnerships between government, businesses, and educational institutions to bridge that gap or potential future gaps between training, education, and skills demanded by employers?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I will say that some of the best examples of like these cross like collaborations really do exist within like the pre-apprenticeship apprenticeship models. Really just being able to have like local, like being able to support like our local community college infrastructure to be able to serve folks, get them exposed to certain like industries that may not be necessarily accustomed to or be like not familiar to like to your average job seeker. Like how are we able to differentiate like construction and manufacturing from advanced manufacturing? What is the difference between a clean energy? What does a clean energy economy even really look like or really even mean? So we have like the community colleges of Philadelphia. We have like a large, robust like educational institutions that are obviously growing, are building their own capacity, are getting tax incentives and getting some additional supports from like like local and state jurisdictions to be able to support the local infrastructure. So how do we rethink the entry points for local residents to be able to get access to those programs? Maybe it's not like a 4 year or 2 year, let's say like accrediting type of program, but is there a migration into this apprenticeship model, which is paid, which is a position, which like has a defined step in terms of career development that we can build more investments around? How can we support those? Because honestly, those are more mechanisms that when we think about like apprenticeships, we're really only thinking about like specific like trades and constructions. It's generally associated with those specific industries. But we're seeing apprenticeships in hospitality, we're seeing apprenticeships in healthcare, transportation, logistics. Like there is a model and a role for this to play across like all industries that really are fervent in Philadelphia. But it's going to take those businesses to have registered apprenticeship programs and be open to that, being registered with the state. It's going to take those educational institutions partnering and understanding that they may not have all those subject matter experts internally. how do they then work with those local businesses to make sure that they have updated and applicable and relevant curriculum to be able to prepare people for those positions, and that we're not pushing people into credentials and to certificates that are really no longer relevant, right? So like every time we're hearing now, like in terms of like, really just being able to identify those certificates that, if you show this to an employer, it's recognized, like it's valued, it's not just necessarily seen as a like as a non-value added certificate or resume filler that employers wouldn't really recognize. So yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about apprenticeship programs over the years, and just in my personal capacity.
Mhm.
What do you think, are the barriers for individuals entering those programs?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot right now, and I feel like one, and I'm glad that the governor has been very vocal about his support for like apprenticeship programs. Like there's apprenticeship PHL that Philadelphia Works is very closely working with a collaboration across like multi-county collaboration to be able to build this apprenticeship pipeline. I honestly just don't think that there's just not enough information that's really out there about how like what is an apprenticeship, like what's the expectation for someone that might be receiving like temporary assistance for needy families, like or TANF. How does that influence like benefits, right? Like so if like for someone that's ultimately trying to like have like a 20 30 hour like activity requirement, like how does that then differ or is reflected within like an apprenticeship program so that I can kind of like start to get acclimated to this environment, to this work, to this industry, but not being necessarily so entrenched that I don't have that flexibility to really be able to say that this is not for me, and be able to explore different areas of different opportunities. I think that ultimately right now we have a number of training providers, and Philadelphia has a large system of community-based organizations that do great work to be able to prepare people for industries and high priority occupations, recovery occupations, but there's not enough of the connection between those employer partners who have those established job needs that can really have a true pipeline as to like you're completing this program, you've gotten this training, like from a reputable organization. Can I trust that ultimately that I don't you don't need to go through like the full application process in order to be able to get into this position? Can someone really have an advanced standing and being considered for these positions if they're going through a number of these like training and applicable like pre-apprenticeship programs? So I think getting the information out there is paramount. Making sure that people know like the difference between a training program, an apprenticeship program, and a pre-apprenticeship program, I think is really important. But strengthening the infrastructure for the training providers to be able to provide incentive for them to expand their capacity, and then encouraging the business community through like Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, African American Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, to really push for the employer partners to say, like, we know that you have these positions that are available. We have reputable programs. We need for you to be able to make that connection and have the trust within the work that they're doing that the people that are coming through this program are prepared for your positions. But they should not be necessarily just like starting from the ground up. We shouldn't be like not recognizing that they put forth this effort and got this training and got these credentials for you for this position. Then that needs to be recognized, and there needs to be some value that is really measurable from that.
If someone came to you, an adult today, and said they wanted to access one of these training programs, what advice would you give that individual?
Come to PA Curling. Easiest access point. So we have as you may be aware, so in Philadelphia we have four PA Curling locations, one in West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, Northwest, and one located at Suburban Station. We receive like walk-ins, there are referrals that come in from the county assistance office, and then ultimately for anyone that's receiving unemployment compensation, they also have to register with the local, like with the public workforce system. For folks who are coming in, if they're interested in any particular trainings, you can go to pacareerlink.pa.gov. It has a listing of all the active trainings that are eligible for public workforce dollars. And so if someone were to come in and be able to see like you're interested in phlebotomy or like I mentioned before, like CDLA or CDLB, We have workforce advisors that will work with them to be able to just get the proper documentation, understand kind of like, what your goals are, like, are there any potential barriers that we may be able to support you with or connect you to additional resources to be able to address any of those barriers that might prevent you from completing these training programs or completing that apprenticeship program. And then as long as that we have those approved programs located on that on the state's website, we also have our own internal website of training providers that we contract with directly. We will be able to pay for a large portion, in many cases, all of the actual training provider costs associated with that particular program. So you can just imagine that someone's coming in and want to do like get their CDLA license. They complete the process, like providing their documentation, answering some questions about like their career goals. They'll talk to a workforce advisor. We'll obviously like start the application. They'll go through with the training provider and ultimately be able to get connected to that program and the employer partners that training provider does work with.
So come to Career Link early. As
Come
soon as
to
possible.
Career
We'll
Link
have
often.
you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And can you repeat that web address again
Yep.
for everyone?
Yeah, so it could be a little bit confusing. Like there's a state website called pacareerlink.pa.gov. And so anyone can access that website. You can like create an account. And there is a page on the website that lists out the available training programs that are already approved as part of what they call the eligible training provider list through the state. There's also a local PA Career Link website. That's pacareerlinkphl.org. And that has more of like the Philly specific initiatives and information about how to get access to services. That does also connect to the PA.gov website. So like there's a way of going back and forth, but if you just like Google PA Career Link PHL, then you should be able to find it.
And folks can get advice there and have a counselor to help walk them through the process if they need a little extra help.
Absolutely. There's resource coordinators there. You can also contact. We also have an 833 line where folks can just be able to call to be able to get access to speak to someone on the line, to be able to get access to adult education services or schedule an appointment with the local workforce connector. So the number for that is going to be 833. Yeah, no, top of my head. 746 and 746 jobs.
Awesome. Thanks for your time today, Marcus. Such fabulous information. Thanks for your good work and your patience. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.
See you later.